editor at TV Line, and we're here for the Writing for Television Experience panel, and we're going to talk to Sheila Lawrence. I'm going to tell you a little bit about her. You guys probably already know how awesome she is, but I'm going to tell you a little bit. Sheila is the Emmy-nominated writer of some of our favorite television shows from the past 20 years. Her first major gig was on Mad About You, and her writing and producing resume includes stints on Ugly Betty, that's what she got the Emmy nod for, Private Practice, Desperate Housewives, Boston Legal, Bunheads, Carter Dixie, and Devious Maids. She most recently worked on the first season of The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. And of course, the credit that we are most concerned with here today is she worked on Gilmore Girls, having various producing roles in Stars Hollow, and she wrote 6 episodes. She's currently a co-executive producer on, she recently was a co-executive producer on Bravo's Imposters. Please join me in welcoming Sheila to the stage. Hey, hello. All right, so how many of us out here, you can close your eyes if you don't want anyone else to see, but who secretly has had a dream that, like, I could write a television episode maybe one day? I definitely have, though I know I can't, right? So I think a lot of us are probably mystified with how you take an idea that is in someone's head and get it to the point where we are watching it happen in Stars Hollow, for instance. Can you give us maybe a brief overview of, like, your experience in writers' rooms, maybe especially starting with a show that, like, you didn't create, so you're coming into someone else's vision that you did.
Yeah, how long do we have? This is a long, I will try to make it a shorter answer, and I'll start by saying the process is different on every single show that you work on, and it's a decision of the showrunner, who usually created the show and runs the writer's room. It's how they want to work. In comedies and lighter dramas, which are the shows I've worked on, it is a very room-based show. You live your life in a writer's room. And in terms of, like, initially generating ideas, you know, some shows make you come in on day one with, you know, 10 story pitches for Rory and Lorelai or whatever. On Gilmore, we tended to just kind of talk a lot in the first few weeks. Just Amy would have some thoughts on what she would want to do in that season. We would famously every summer take a story retreat in Vegas, which involved a lot of, like, water aerobics and martinis, and occasionally, like, figuring out what the first 13 episodes were going to be. It's nice. I enjoy working on a serialized show where, you know, you carry out a story over time, and Gilmore was that to a degree, and so we would usually kind of plot out the first 13 episodes, and then and know kind of like the overall shape, like, you know, say by episode 13, you know, Rory and Dean are going to kiss. Okay, so what are, like, 13 stories along the way to that? And they're not always related, but it kind of helps you to have that framework. And then on Gilmore, we would then take another story retreat, because why not take another trip? And at that point, it was more to get Amy and Dan isolated and away from their 10,000 duties that they had. So we would go away for a weekend and figure out the second half of the season, again, in just kind of an overarching sort of way. And then, you know, that's kind of the macro picture. And then on an individual episode, we were big fans of using the whiteboard. You just start and you write out, they're called the beats of the story. You know, they're just the basic steps of the story. And once, you know, we'd figure that out as a room, and Amy would come in and sign off on them, or more often make them way better. Then you erase them, and then you write them in a little more detail. And then, you know, she comes in, approves, disapproves, whatever, erase and write in more detail. And it's sort of that process until it's ready to go off and be outlined. And at that point, a writer takes over the process, and an individual goes off and outlines the episode, gets notes from Amy and Dan, and goes off and writes the script. So that's sort of the overview.
And that all happens in, like, so, from the beginning of a script to getting it shot.
It depends what point in the season it is, because early on, you have, like, the luxury of weeks of time, and, you know, by the end, you're breaking a story, and then it feels like 2 weeks later you're watching it on TV. You're like, not quite that short, but it's like, it gets really crazy toward the end of a 20-plus episode season. So.
Let's be honest, there are shows where sometimes it is that short.
It is absolutely that short sometimes.
Some shows you guys might know. So, take me back to the first time that a line you wrote that came out of your brain was uttered by a character on television, and you saw that. What was that like?
Now I've got to think for a second. I don't even remember if this was the first time, but it was one of the first times. And it was I started in kids television, and I had worked on a sketch comedy show before, so I'd had some things, but sketches, they were so short. There was a show called Roundhouse, and it was very fast-paced, and the sketches would be...
Anyone watch Roundhouse?
They're too young. It's true. But it was actually a very good show. But that was super, group effort, whatever. It never felt mine. The first time I wrote a full script with my name on it was for a kids show for Disney, and the writers' offices were not near the set. And so one day, finally, I had some time to just go to set, and I remember opening the door. I don't know why I opened the door when they were shooting, now that I think about it. You're not supposed to do that. But I quietly opened the door and heard them saying my lines. And it was just shocking. It was like jarring and wonderful. And I'm like, why would they say those things I wrote? I'm sure someone could have thought of something better. Another thing, and I'm sorry, this is just now I'm thinking about it, a lot of times early on I would make the mistake of putting something in a stage direction that I'm just like, that's a placeholder for a prop, a heart-shaped perfume bottle, whatever, I'll fix it later. Well, it goes out in a script and people start making it. And you realize, oh wow, they pay attention, like the power of the pen. It really is fascinating.
So you shouldn't put like giant blue dragon with CGI effects.
You definitely should not, but I'm sure people have.
So I'm wondering the flip side of that. Was there ever a time when you thought something sounded really good in your head, and maybe at the table read, and then you got into the shooting and you're like, oh no.
That happens in every scene of every script. I am not really exaggerating. I mean, and the frustrating thing is if you're not the showrunner, you don't have final say over what the final script is, and there's nothing worse than writing a line that you thought was good, and then you heard it and you're like, oh, that is so clunky, it sounds like an off-key note or something, and the showrunner's like, no, it's fine. And you're like, no, God, please, I'm begging you, please, let's take that line out, or let's take that scene out, it's stupid, it doesn't, no, it's good. And it's the worst,
Because you don't have the power then to be like, cut, we're gonna do that again, roll it back, right? Like, I mean, you're kind of standing there and hoping for the best?
On the shows that I work on, yes. No, I just would say there's a whole other type of shows. It's usually more like procedural dramas. My husband writes on Criminal Minds, and they very much have ownership of their own scripts, from the lowest writer up to the exec producers. They write the script. They get a ton of notes and rewrites and all of that, but they are the ones on set making changes if they need to happen. And so every word, when you see a written by on a show like that, it usually is written by the person it says written by. On a comedy or a relationship show, it says written by, but there are a lot of other hands kind of in the mix as well.
So on Gilmore specifically, on a script that you maybe had more ownership of than others, would you be on set during shooting?
Gilmore, no, and that was actually oddly one of the reasons I ended up leaving the show after 3 years, was just because at that point I was a co-exec producer, and producers are expected to know how to produce a show, not just write it. So, generally on hour-long shows, the writer-producer will be on set to address any questions that come up, to, kind of help oversee the tone of the scene. The writers have more of a sense of how it fits in the season as a whole, whereas directors are brought in just for that episode, so they don't always know the whole thing. So it's very helpful for a writer to be on set. On Gilmore, we were just in the writer's room. We did not go to set. Amy and Dan obviously spent a lot of time bouncing back and forth from set to the room to post casting to everywhere else, but we did not produce our own episodes.
So how much interaction did you have with the actors then, if you weren't around physically that much?
Not that much on Gilmore. And I didn't really know how unusual that was. Gilmore was my first hour-long show that I had done. I had done half hours before that. And I had no idea. I just thought, oh, this is how they are. Writers stay in the writer's room, actors stay on set. But no, so we didn't have a lot of interaction, but typically you do on other shows.
So you came in after the first season. So it was the world was established, the actors were established. How much of when you were writing voice did you think about how they were playing? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, how much did the actor's portrayal of the character that someone else wrote affect how you wrote that character?
Yeah, no, that does make sense. I'm taking a time out to take this poncho off because I'm boiling.
It's so warm up here.
last night was freezing, and I refused to put on a wrap because it didn't match. But now I'm really hot. So
Very pretty dress. I'm enjoying it.
Questions? No, I'm just kidding. No, I mean, for me, I hear voices in my head. That's really what it comes down to. I mean, if a show exists, and it's a show that I watch or relate to or whatever, which Gilmore was a show I loved as a fan, season 1. I hear the voices in my head. Like you hear what is created, and it just becomes very. It's almost like hear it like a foreign language or music or whatever. It's just like that is something Lorelai would say, or it is not. And if you're not the creator, there are some missteps. I mean, I cringe at some of my early scripts and things that I wrote where Amy and Dan were like, no, you know.
Anything?
This isn't even funny, but I remember I legit named like an Emily Butler like Jeeves or something. Like I was like, oh, that's what fancy people do. They have butlers named Jeeves, and Dan was like, no.
It's okay, he probably wasn't around for very long anyway, so even if you had been, maybe you would have been.
Exactly, it was a one-off.
You're based in Los Angeles. Have you been there your whole career? Have you been centered there your whole career?
I've been based there my whole career, and then worked on shows that shoot elsewhere.
Okay. How important, is there anyone out here who thinks they might want to be a writer for television? Yes, this is good.
Do you have any other skills? It's a really hard field to get into. I'm just kidding. I think go for it.
It's like it's really hard and you'll hate your life, but go, it's awesome.
Do it.
So how important do you think, or is it necessary to be in either New York or LA or just LA? Like how important is location of the actual writer?
For TV writing, it is crucial. I mean, I think, and that's right at this point in history. I mean, TV, as we all know, is evolving really quickly. But even with the streaming and cable and whatever, they tend to be still predominantly based in Los Angeles. And I mean, really what it comes down to with any show is where the person with the most power on the show wants the show to be. So if you get a star attached who will sell the show and they live in New York and they want to stay in New York, your show will move to New York. If there's no one really with any particular power, you know, they'll stick you in Vancouver because it's cheaper, you know, like it just, but the writers' rooms, for the most part, are LA based, and even the New York shows tend to hire from LA, and then those people relocate to New York during the show and then come back to LA. That's just where most of the work is. You know, obviously for other types of writing, you know, features or novels or anything like that, you could live wherever you wanted, but as of right now, LA is still kind of the center.
So I'm thinking from a writing standpoint. Now, obviously, what I write is nowhere near as important or as interesting as what this woman writes. And guys, thanks for not being mad that I'm not my glossy yellow. That was really nice of you to not boo me when I came out here.
I'm a little mad.
He's very busy on his book tour. But this is what it's making me think of, is that, you know, when you write all day, especially for someone else, and maybe you have something germinating in the back of your head, a book, a show of your own creation from, you know, whole cloth, even other freelance things. It's very difficult to come home and then write more, right? You're tired, and words are hard. So I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about that. Has that been an issue for you? Do you have one part of your brain that turns on when you're writing for someone else, and another that is when it's all you? Talk a little bit about that.
I feel we should get my therapist on speakerphone here too to be a part of this discussion, because this is going to come to a lot of my personal failings and disappointments.
Excellent.
But no, in a best, well, there are a couple different ways people approach it. I know people who are perhaps on staff of a show that is not creatively invigorating to them. You know, as we all know, there are a lot of shows on TV that are not good shows, but jobs are scarce, and a lot of times you end up working on something that's not necessarily a thing you would watch or write. So those people often kind of get their creative fulfillment from their own projects that they go home and work on at night, you know, and that's what kind of keeps their sanity. Those people also tend to not sleep a lot or don't have families. So for me, I have not successfully been able to do that. I wish I could. I'm very much like there are people who, you know, are running a show and at the same time creating their next show, and
how do they do that?
I don't know. I wish I knew. I would have a very different life if I knew. But Yeah, it's baffling to me. So I don't know. I think some of those people can be thinking all the time. Like my husband gets ideas on his commute home, whereas I just like shut down. So I need to like go, okay, now is my thinking time, and now I'm done thinking. And I think the more successful writers, kind of life is thinking time, and they're just constantly working.
So we were talking a little bit backstage about, I hate this term, so I'm using it like sarcastically, but work-life balance if you have a family. And I don't think it's just for women, although I think women do bear a bit of the brunt. But if you have, so you have this crazy thing you're passionate about and that you've been lucky enough to parlay into people paying you for, but you also want to have a fulfilling home life, you want to maybe have hobbies, you want to sleep every once in a while. Talk to me a little bit about maybe how your experience in this field, doing what you do, is different now than it was when you first started out, and how things have changed for you and the field.
Right, so I got married and had kids late. I have a 7-year-old and a 10-year-old, and so I had a lot of years of working before that. And it was, it's not timing that I would have planned to happen this way, because I sort of did all my dues paying and kind of just got to the point where people wanted to hear what I wanted to create as a show, and then that's when I started having babies who I felt compelled to raise. So it has affected the jobs that I take and the projects I do. In my 20s and early 30s, I was an assistant on Friends, which was, we did all-nighters every week. That was when you still got newspapers, and the newspaper would beat me home in the morning. But there was nothing else vying for my time. Like, it was just fun. I like hanging out in a writer's room on a hit show with really funny people. Like, it was an exciting thing. But I could never take a job like that now. And that's just for me personally, and I pass no judgment on people, men or women, who make different choices. There are certainly other options, and but for me, Heart of Dixie was a job I took primarily because they had very good hours. Also because I felt, it was Gilmore-like, and I sort of knew the world. But at the end of the day, I was like, oh, okay, this is a job I can get home and help my kids with homework. And the showrunner was a woman with kids, and also was understanding if you had to go to the pediatrician or the doctor or whatever. It's rare, because a lot of television happens in the writer's room and as a group mentality sort of thing, and you're just expected to be there. So it's tough. It just impacts what you do. And I've had to turn down, just recently, something that seemed very interesting to me. And but it was just like they were going to get out at 7 every night, best case scenario, and very far from my house. And I'm like, I don't know how to make that happen.
So when shows are shooting, have you guys heard of the term Fratterday, where like they start shooting on Friday and they end shooting on Saturday, so your weekend is big?
Yeah, I've never heard that term. That's great. I know the concept, but I didn't know the term.
If I dreamed it or something. You're the pro. But I'm wondering, like, in a room, is it the same kind of thing? Would you pull all-nighters? Would you be there all night?
It's not as in fashion now as it used to be, but like 90s sitcoms, it was like a badge of honor to stay all night. So Mad About You was a 7-day-a-week show, usually, and Friends was 5 days a week, but with all-nighters in there, always. So the hours were bad. And those are on the shows you've heard of. What's really demoralizing is doing that on the shows that like barely make it to air. But it seems from my friends' experiences on half hours now that it's not quite as in fashion. But again, with kids, the difference between getting off at 7 or getting off at 9, that's a big difference. If you're single, that's not cutting into your sleep, but it's like, I leave in the morning and I don't see my kids till tomorrow? Like, that doesn't... Anyway, balance.
Just as a side note, if you guys have questions, we're going to have time at the end, so be thinking about that. But you've been on so many shows that I love, and I know that you've been on so many Gilmore-ish shows and Gilmore-adjacent shows that I feel like there's a lot of love in this room. So I'm going to ask you, you don't have to tell us which show, and you can think about it for a minute, but like give me some like terrible day on X set. Or like someone was not doing you well, Ms. Lawrence, or you know what I mean? Like, I want dirt, but you can do it anonymously and you can think about it. I'll ask you another question in the meantime, all right? People usually need a minute or two to work. They're like, I couldn't. Well, there was this one time. Is there a dream show that you, either that's already been on or that's on right now, that you were like, this is the thing that I would love to be doing if I had everything perfect?
Oh my God, that's actually a harder question.
All right, well,
that was a really good question.
How about this one? What show could you never see yourself writing?
Oh God, most shows.
Like, could you see yourself penning like a Breaking Bad script?
Sadly, no. I wish I could. That's an amazing show. But no, it's taken me a long time to kind of know what I do well, and it's sort of in that the sort of the Venn diagram of where comedy and drama overlap. Like, so I either write, half-hour comedies that have a lot of heart and character to them, or one-hour dramas that have a lot of laughs and don't take themselves too seriously. So that's kind of what I do best.
Okay.
So
you say that you know that now. Where can you think of instances where you tried a show that didn't work?
Yeah, very much so. So I started in half hours. And always thought that's what I would do. I mean, it's interesting because some writers call themselves a comedy writer, some writers call themselves a drama writer. Now, I always just called myself a writer, but in the comedy area. That's what I expected to do, that's what I watched growing up. And when I got Gilmore Girls, I had just written an hour-long spec script that had a lot of comedy in it, and it confused my agents because they were like, oh wait, you're a drama writer now? And I'm like, no, this is just tonally, it's exactly what I would have written in a half hour, it just was an hour that I liked better. And then it got me Gilmore, and then coming off of Gilmore, I was only put up for dramas. Like right after Gilmore, I worked on a short-lived show called Clubhouse that was about a bat boy for the Yankees. And it was a straight up drama. Like it was, an act break is like, and then he got mugged, and things that don't come out of my brain readily. So, and then that continued for a while. I mean, some of those credits, I sort of cringed. I'm like, private practice and Boston Legal, and like, those are not what I do, but it took me a long time. I'm not that bright. It took me a long time to figure out, like, oh, they think I write drama. No, that's wrong. And I'm still, because they only remember, the Hollywood powers that be, only remember the last thing you did. And so I am still desperately trying to get back to half hours because I never meant to be a drama writer.
So be thinking about the juicy. We're gonna come back to the juicy. Was there ever writing, as we were talking about backstage, is so solitary. Even when you're with other people, it has to come out of your head. And it's really easy to shut yourself down. Anyone else experience that? Where you're like, this is terrible, I'm never showing it to anyone. But you have to show it to people. How hard is it to get to that point where you're like, I made this thing, please don't shit on it. You know what I mean? Like, sorry.
No. I mean, it's always hard.
They've censored us.
Maybe someone will magically appear. No, I mean, that is always hard, but it does get easier. And it's much easier, I think, on a show, writing on a staff of a show that already exists. We were talking about this a little bit beforehand. You've at least in the story-breaking process kind of had everyone weighing in and sort of getting on board together. And there's a little bit of like back and forth where, if you have an idea, you can kind of say like, is this good? Is this good? You like this? Do you like this? Okay, now I can write it. And so, because everyone's been involved in it, it's not quite as hard to show as completely original material, for me anyway. But it does get easier over time. And one time, about 10 years ago, I worked for these people who wanted to see the first 10 pages before you went on. It was a brand new show, and they wanted to make sure you weren't going off in a wrong direction with it. And I'd never done anything like that before. And that's just not how, I don't write like ready to be seen. I do a terrible draft with a lot of like XXX, joke to come, blah blah, like couplet here, specifics to figure out later. And I accidentally sent that version in. And it was the worst feeling I have ever had as a writer. And it wasn't that bad. Like, I wasn't fired. But my boss didn't even seem to think it was particularly weird. He was like, yeah, I saw the X's, okay. Yeah, you'll figure out the joke. So the story seems to be going in the right direction, and maybe change this. And, I mean, it was just shocking, because that was like showing someone the inside of your brain, you know, not cleaned up for public presentation. And surviving that, I think, has made everything else a little easier, but you know, you're making yourself vulnerable. It's never the most fun thing.
I would have had the biggest heart attack and then been like, do I email? Do I not email it? Did you like send and be like, JK, no, that wasn't actually...
I didn't realize it until he was giving me the notes, and he started giving me notes on something that shouldn't have been in there anymore. And I'm like, but I took that out. And they're like, no, it was in there. And then the realization as we're in the actual notes session. It was awful. Writers can appreciate it. It was awful. Yeah. Take a minute.
I'm like welling up just like thinking about the horror of that. All right, so I think we're going to start taking a few questions. If you have any questions, please feel free to come to the front mic here. And if you don't, we're just going to chat for a few more minutes. I need
coming back.
I need a bag.
I need dirt.
Because here's my thinking. Oh, you're getting saved. Look, everyone likes, like from the outside, everyone's lives always seem a lot better than they are, right?
Of course.
In this Instagram of ours. Yeah. So I always take great heart in feeling like people who I admire when they're like, oh, this terrible thing happened to me, or this was the absolute worst day I had. So think about it.
Yeah,
you're doing something for the people.
Oh no, I don't mind. I put it out there all the time. It's just a matter of, you know, deciding which one to share.
All right, we'll take this first. So, tell us your name and ask your question, please.
Okay, hi, I'm Kim.
Hi, Kim.
Hi, I'm a writer as well, but I'm wondering if you can give me some advice on making the transition from, I'm a journalist, so I'm a feature writer, and I'm writing a novel that I've never written for the screen. And so I wonder if there's a few key things that set screenwriting apart from other writing that you could share.
In terms of the writing itself, or in terms of how you would make that transition and get some kind of a break?
I think more just the writing itself. Yeah. How that looks and how, maybe what to be mindful of, what people look for when they're looking at someone and if they decide whether they can write for the screen or not.
Right. That is a hard but good question. You know, a lot, and showrunners look for different things. So,
no, that's people sharing outside.
Oh, okay. All right then. I mean, like, I look for voice a lot. As I said earlier, like it's like nails on a chalkboard when characters speak in a way that just doesn't sound right. It doesn't sound how people would talk. That's something, and I feel like that would be a thing to work on if your writing has been mostly prose. You know, the dialogue is going to be a big part of it. I look at character a lot, and are you creating characters that are interesting or intriguing and not like your first blurt thing that you would expect, like, you know, oh, a dumb blonde, wow, I've never thought of that, you know, like, just I'm like, oh, interesting. And then, you know, obviously, can you tell a story? You know, it's gotta make sense and end up in a hopefully surprising place and be a fun journey along the way. But as a writer, you know that. So the only thing that's different really is the dialogue.
Yeah,
putting it
more
on
dialogue
instead of prose.
That's helpful, thank you.
Sure.
Hi, I'm Shayna. I'm curious because I know that you've worked with Amy and Dan on various shows, and kind of, as things have evolved, all three fantastic shows, and I'm wondering how they've differed, like as they've grown as writers and showrunners, and how maybe the writing and the producing of those have
Wait, and what was the second part?
like just as they've grown as showrunners, and how maybe the writers' rooms have changed or whatever over the years.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, a little hard for me to speak to. I don't want to speak on their behalf, but because I especially feel, I mean, Amy and Dan both have always been very sure of their voice. So I would say a more typical journey would be that, like, a writer on their first show would take too many notes and would water down what they were doing, and then by the time they get success, they're able to stand behind what they do. Amy and Dan have always stood behind what they're doing, and you know, Amy used to get in trouble for it a lot. I mean, at Warner Brothers, could be a contentious relationship when she wouldn't take notes. I mean, she knew what she wanted. And that's hard for a writer who is not yet Amy Sherman-Palladino, you know, to do that. That she is a fighter, fights harder for what she believes in than any writer I know. And then at least just as she got success, didn't get as much blowback for it. I think, for me, I was a very junior writer when I started, and so I was just always scared talking around them and always deferred to everything they said. And on Mrs. Maisel, I felt it was nice that I felt they listened to me, and I felt like, okay, we've all kind of grown up together in this. And they have the reputation for being, it is their vision, but they are good listeners too. And if there's a good idea, they're not the showrunners who have to have thought of it themselves. And there are definitely a lot of those people out there. They enjoy being in a room, they enjoy that time, they enjoy the creative process. But yeah, just in general, beginning to end, they just always have a sense of what they want.
Awesome, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Hi. My name's Stefania. So you said you started doing children's TV?
Mm-hmm.
My boyfriend wants to try to do this Steve Irwin-esque children's show where he travels and talks to animals and stuff.
Oh, wow.
And I would do the writing part of it. So what advice would you have for writing children's shows and getting into that?
Oh, wow. I unfortunately, I'm not a big expert on that. I started, as a lot of jobs do, because of a friend who was on the show. It was someone I had worked with somewhere else in a totally different capacity, and then he ended up on a Nickelodeon sketch show and said, hey, do you want to be a writer's assistant? Do you know anything about that? And I said, no, but I will by tomorrow. And that was, I hadn't even been a writer. I didn't even know, we didn't talk about early on, but I spent 3 years kind of bouncing around Hollywood trying to figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up. And it wasn't until this job, which was truly kind of just a fluke, that it was like, oh my gosh, writers, these are my people. This is it. This is what I've been looking for. And that was through being an assistant. So I got to kind of rise up through the ranks that way. Unfortunately, I don't know. I wish I knew.
That's okay.
But I would say right now with the internet, and with tools, just like your iPhone and stuff, you can make something. I mean, you don't have to do it incredibly professionally or anything. You could make a version of what you want to do and get it out there. I think, I'm just guessing, but that seems like a way to, kind of create your calling card and show what you're thinking about.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
Hi, I'm Carly.
Hi, Carly.
I was wondering what Disney show you wrote for.
Oh, I was wishing I didn't say that because it was like a little kids one. It was called Sing Me a Story with Belle. And it was using old Disney animation, and Belle had a bookshop, and it was like wraparounds for these Disney animated things. It was not a show you would have watched.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, I'm Lily.
Hi, Lily.
I have 2 questions, if that's okay.
Sure.
The first, you mentioned a little earlier that giving a draft to someone is a very vulnerable experience. And I'm just starting up and writing things out of my brain, and that's really scary to know, is this good, is it not good? And I was wondering, when you were starting out, who did you decide to share your drafts with? And what sort of feedback were you looking for to get better? Because people can crush you and your creative spirit or build you up. So how do you decide?
It is so hard because you also, you want to listen to the notes too, by the way, when people tell you something, but you also need to know when to stand by something you believe in. It's a tricky thing. I mean, I think you have to show it to people who, they bring something to it that is valuable to you. Either they are the target audience for the thing that you're writing, and they can either say, I relate to this or I don't, or they're a writer who has done something. So I would, early on when I was an assistant, I would tend to, from working all-nighters and whatever, curry favor with the writers who would say hey, if you ever want to show me a script, feel free. So I had people who I knew were good writers who were doing what I wanted to do, who then could give feedback, and I would listen to it because I'm they've been doing this for a while. But you can get feedback from anybody who you think is smart and has good taste, and especially with television writing, since that's meant for the masses, it's good to hear what people say. I will say that when people give you notes, a lot of times it's a good rule to take the note but not their fix. And that's across the board. I mean, but even with executives, executives will give you a note and go, and here's what I think you should do. And it's no, the note is right, there's a problem in this area, but that fix is terrible, so let me figure out a different way to fix it. So, And yeah, in terms of just the vulnerability, I mean, I am married to a writer who has only ever seen one thing that I've written. So I understand it. It's a common, writers share a lot of similar personality traits. I feel like we all kind of share a brain. So that is very common. It gets a little easier, but yeah.
Awesome, thank you. And what Gilmore Girls arc do you feel the most warm and fuzzy about that you maybe were a part of?
Oh wow, I don't know about warm and fuzzy. I feel proud that I pitched like the Christopher, I can't remember his girlfriend's name now. Sherry, thank you. I named her, I forgot it. My Aunt Sherry. Yeah, I mean, I remember pitching that arc, and that was shortly after I had started, and so I just felt good about doing that, and I enjoyed getting to see what the Christopher-Lorelai relationship was. I in no way wanted them together ultimately, but I thought that was an interesting journey, and for Rory too. That's the one that comes to mind.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sarah. I was wondering, when writing for Gilmore Girls, what kind of decisions did you have to make to appeal to the intended audience?
Wait, I'm sorry, what kind of...
Like,
what?
this is for my management class. It's about strategic planning. So, like, what kind of decisions did you have to make, like, when writing for, like, the audience that you want to appeal to?
I'm not sure. I don't know how to answer that question. I mean, I think as a writer, you just try to tell the story. Like, I don't, on this show, I mean, there are certainly some shows, and certainly now in social media age, where you're paying attention to what everyone likes and wants and whatever, but I feel like that wasn't part of our process. It wasn't like, oh, the fans want more Rory and Dean or anything like that. I mean, I think it was just, to be honest, not thinking about the audience, but we all loved the show, so in a sense we were the audience too, so we're like just figuring out what stories we liked, and as part of the audience, then hopefully the rest of the audience would like it too, if that makes any sense.
Twitter also wasn't a thing.
No, it didn't exist yet, so
you
yeah.
didn't get that instant feedback yet.
No, which I prefer not having that. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Bonnie.
Hi.
And first off, I was really excited to see this on the schedule because I want to go into either writing for television or directing for television.
Can you step a little closer to the mic?
Sorry. My name is Bonnie, and I was really excited to see this on the schedule because if my dream job would be to either write or direct for television or maybe do both. And my question is, when you write a script for somebody else or you write it for yourself, do you get a plot from the producers or do you think of the ideas by yourself?
It can go either way. It can absolutely go either way. There are certain shows where you are expected to come in with the story idea and possibly the whole plot broken out, and other writers may give feedback on it, but that you as the writer are responsible for bringing it to the table. For example, Criminal Minds, where my husband works, that is the writer in the episode is responsible for coming up with everything, pretty much. Other shows, no, the shows I work on, you tend to figure it out as a room. And then, there's a greater or lesser degree of stuff that you go off with when you write. Some writers' rooms, it's very minimal and you have a lot of discovery to do. You kind of know what the story point is of every beat, but beyond that, you get to sort of figure out how to decorate it. Gilmore Girls, we really landed precisely on every single thing that was going to happen in the scene before going off to write.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sam, and I want to either write or direct films or TV shows. And I'm wondering if you went to school for it or if you just did a program, and I want to know what school or program that you got involved in to get to.
Okay, so no school or program. I had no formal training. And I will just say, because I remember when I was your age, thinking I wanted to write or direct. And so they are wildly different things. I think to direct, you would have to go to film school or some kind of more technical sort of training program. For writing, sure, there are programs out there writing for the television. I know Loyola has a really good one. Northwestern does. But most people that I know did not in undergraduate study television writing. For me, I was one of those people who forever didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up, and even in college, I'm like, I don't know, should I be an astronaut? Should I be a veterinarian? I don't know. And it took me forever to realize that literally since childhood, I had like geared every assignment in any class toward television. Like in 7th grade for an English project, created a game show and made my friends play it, and I don't know how that was English, but whatever. And in a religion class, I wrote Job as a soap opera, and in sociology, I studied gender roles on primetime sitcoms, doing a lot of research, And it wasn't literally until my senior year where I'm like, oh, maybe there are jobs in television. So needless to say, I didn't study that in school, but the great thing as a writer is you truly, the broader the education you have, kind of the better. You could draw on anything, you love art history, you create a character who, works in that field, is a museum curator. So that, any knowledge you have can be useful in your writing. And I think in terms of learning how to write for television, watching a lot of television, but like not just watching it passively, like breaking down the scenes. I used to do that, like write them down on a piece of paper to kind of get how it was structured. There are tons of books, tons of blogs out there. Jane Espenson has a really good one, all about how to learn the craft of TV writing.
Thank you.
Sure.
I think we have time for 2 more questions, maybe 3, but we'll see.
Okay, I'll talk faster.
Hi, I'm Jen.
Hi.
So Gilmore Girls is full of like really interesting characters. Was there one that was kind of easier to write for, or not really?
No, that's a really good question. I loved writing Emily. Everyone says that, but she was really, really fun to write. Yeah, Emily was great. It's all the ones you would think. Paris was a fun character to write for. Kirk was a fun character to write for. And any Lorelai Rory scene was just fun. Just writing that dynamic was a lot of fun.
Okay, awesome, thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, I'm Alicia.
Hi.
I guess my question is, starting out, how do you kind of get your work into the world, like beyond your friend base? Like, do you send it to festivals, or like, how do you kind of get your work into the world? I guess.
We could talk afterwards too if you'd like. I don't know a ton about how to do that now, and I feel like it has changed a lot. It's really hard, not impossible, but really hard to break in now, to break in as a staff writer. I went the path that a lot of people do still, of being an assistant first, and that a writer's assistant is in the writer's room with the writers all the time. You're taking notes till your fingers bleed, but it's a great way to watch the process, to meet people, to learn. It's like a paid education in how to write. And then ideally, if you happen to get on a show that is on the air for a while, sometimes writer's assistants get promoted to writer. But in terms of just getting your stuff out there, it's tricky. The best thing is to start trying to know people and find someone who knows someone who knows someone who can, get a script somewhere.
Well, thank you.
Sure.
Hi there, I'm Dana.
Hi.
So nowadays, like you've been saying, it's all about kind of creating your own content and getting yourself out there. So when you're trying to write a spec script or a pilot for like what could be potentially a new series, how much of an arc do you see in the full storyline before you write the pilot? Like, do you have an idea 5 episodes out or like a season out where a character would go?
Me personally, I do. I feel like if I'm gonna, and normally I would pitch and try and sell an idea before writing the pilot script, but even if I'm just writing it on spec, I, for my process, need to know, season 7 where these people are gonna be. That's too much. I know people much more successful than I am who sell an idea and then decide, like, okay, now we'll figure out what it is. When I got staffed onto Ugly Betty, I remember sitting down to the creator and I'm a little confused. So is it a mystery or a soap opera or a comedy or a family drama? And he's like, yeah, all those things. And he was right, but it was also the problem with the show. We never quite found out what it was, and every season it sort of changed. But again, he got a show on the air for 4 years, and I've never done that. So it's sort of whatever you're comfortable with, but if you're pitching, they will ask kind of where characters will go, at least in the first year, if not the first 5.
Great, thanks.
All right, so we got 7 minutes and 3 questions. I think we can do this?
We can do it, we can
All
do
right,
it.
excellent. Go for it.
Hi, I'm Hannah.
Hi.
How do you deal with burnout or writer's block? Like, how do you stay inspired whenever you feel like you're tired of a storyline or a particular character?
That is such a good question that I wish I had a really good answer to, and I don't, because I'm sort of in that space. I don't know what to write next. So right now I've been cleaning my house a lot and doing other creative things. Like I did a beautiful photo wall up my staircase, and I'm landscaping. So getting a lot of other stuff done. I think finding other creative things that inspire you. Like I've seen Hamilton 4 times because it just blows my mind. And
You just made a lot of enemies in this room.
I'm sorry. I know. Yeah, I'm sorry. But it is so inspiring to me that someone had, because if I had had that idea, which I never would have, but if I had, I would have instantly told myself, this could never work, and that would have been the end of it. So I just just try things that inspire you, that don't even have to necessarily be writing, but just inspiration kind of in any way that like what makes you feel something.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Oh, hi. So I'm Caroline, and I have to do a creative writing piece for English, and I was wondering if you had any tips or tricks for writing.
Wait, I'm sorry, you have to do a creative writing piece for English?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. See, I kind of avoided that in school. I got a little nervous when you just said that, because that feels so daunting to me because it's so wide open. I will say, and I always feel like kind of a cheat as a writer, like a fraud, because I write shows that already exist. The characters are given to you. The world is given to you. When it is just like, write a piece of creative writing, that is scary. I applaud you. I don't know what advice to give you except to know that anyone in that position finds it really scary, and you just have to push through it. There's no magic answer. Writing is hard.
Hi, Andrea. So yesterday, George and Carla on their panel were talking about homages in reference to All the President's Men with Francie. There's a lot of comparisons out there with Twin Peaks and bringing in characters or actors who actually were on that show. I wondered if that was intentional or just coincidence.
Wait, but in terms of
the show, like there's a lot of articles out there that compare the two shows as
Gilmore and Twin Peaks?
Yeah, some
I have not seen
similarities.
that.
Yeah, just I think in the quirkiness of the characters and the isolation of the town.
Oh, that's really interesting. No, I have not heard that, and I didn't know that. What I could say is that both those projects have a strong vision at the center of them.
Yeah.
David Lynch and Amy Sherman-Palladino are very different people, but again, with a strong singularity of vision, so I'm not surprised in that sense that they might be compared. I have to just think about that.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
So, and then also, do you just have what is your ultimate aspiration? Like, are you working on any projects of your own or anything like that?
Yeah, so ultimate aspiration would be to have my own show on the air. The problem with that now is that is a beyond 24/7 kind of a job. So I'm currently trying to figure out how I could, even if I could sell a show, how to make that happen in my life. So I'm actually looking maybe to partner up with someone to share the burden. I'm not sure. And right now I'm mentoring a couple of younger writers and supervising their pilots. So that's figuring it out, work in progress.
That's awesome. Thank you.
All right, last question.
Hi, my name is Ash. I have a specific question about your writing with Gilmore Girls around the character of Emily, who my family and I think a lot of others, Dirty Dancing kind of came to mind. We talked about this a little bit last night, the references and the subtle innuendos that were so cool, the writing style. I think we were waiting all series for some kind of a Dirty Dancing reference or a don't put Rory in a corner kind of line. And was that ever discussed? I mean, I just was curious, did that idea ever get thrown out there? You guys did such a great job making these references.
We did but we had that reference in the script. No one puts Rory in a corner. Or I think we said no one puts baby in a corner, but I think we did the actual line. It was in a script I wrote. That's why I'm pretty sure we did do it in the Presenting Lorelai Gilmore, the debutante ball episode. I think that was in there. I think.
So it was a good idea, right?
It was a great idea.
Thank you.
All right, before we go, give me some dirt. Come on.
Oh man.
Because who wants to hear behind the scenes dirt about a show? As big as you want. We'll eat it up.
I know you will. I'll think of it like tonight in bed, and I'll personally email everyone here. The one that comes to mind, and it's not that juicy because it was a short-lived show that was terrible, but usually the actors tried their best anyway. And it was a script that I had written, and it was the table read, and the lead actor, Kevin Pollak, was very unhappy with the. Shame, why not? Was very unhappy.
We name names
with,
here.
with the. What we were doing with his character, and we said to him, we will address that. We will, after the table read, we will take your notes, we will rework it, whatever. And he did the table read with the network executives there, with everyone watching, with his sunglasses on his hand like this. And it was such an FU that it was just like, seriously? And then that show was canceled on the day we were supposed to shoot my episode, not that episode, a different one. We shot on a Friday, and like Friday morning, and my mom was coming, and my brother, and whatever, and the writers had a great day. We went to Universal Studios because we were on that lot, and just rode Jurassic Park all day, and then drank a lot of martinis, and then decided we should all do the show anyway, just for fun, even though we didn't film it. So we finished the whole thing in like 20 minutes. It was fun.
That's a good story. All right, thank you guys so much. Let's give Sheila a hand, please.
Thank you.
If you're around tonight for the cast panel, I will be back here, still not being like Gloss Yellow.